There was a specific moment when I stopped thinking of my backyard as just a yard. I was looking at a grocery receipt, one of those receipts that keeps printing, the kind where you have to fold it to fit it in your pocket. And I started doing some rough math on what the fresh produce section alone was costing me every month. Herbs I bought and used half of before they went limp. Salad greens I paid $6 a bag for. Berries that were gone in 2 days. All of it adding up week after week to a number that felt increasingly hard to justify when I had soil sitting 30 feet away doing nothing. So I decided to run an experiment. I gave myself a $500 budget, not a dollar more, and I built a backyard garden system designed around one specific goal. Not just a single good season, but a setup that would keep producing and keep paying me back indefinitely, with costs that dropped every year instead of rising. This video is the honest account of exactly what I spent, what I built, what it returned, and why that $500 decision has compounded into something I would never give back. Make sure you stick around for the section on the one plant in this setup that most people never put in their garden. A plant that requires almost nothing from you, produces every year without replanting for up to 20 years, and costs less than $40 to establish. It is the quietest and most dependable part of this entire backyard, and by the time I explain the math behind it, you will understand exactly why it belongs in yours. But first, let's talk about the money. $500 sounds like either a lot or a little for a garden, depending on who you ask. Garden centers will sell you a single pre-built raised bed kit for $200 before you have filled it with soil or dropped a single seed. Professional landscape installation for a kitchen garden starts at $100 per square foot and goes up from there. By those standards, $500 for an entire backyard food system sounds impossible. It is not impossible. It just requires spending the money on the right things in the right order and understanding what is infrastructure versus what is annual cost. Here is exactly what the $500 covered. 2 DIY cedar raised beds, each 4 feet wide and 8 feet long, using cedar fence pickets sourced from the home improvement store. Cedar is the right material for food gardens because it contains natural oils that resist rot without any chemical treatment, and a well-built cedar bed lasts 10 to 15 years or more in most climates. At current lumber prices, a 4x8 cedar bed built from fence pickets runs roughly $60 to $90 in materials, including hardware. 2 beds, approximately $150. That left $350 for everything else. Soil was the next line item. A quality growing mix, not native ground soil which compacts and drains poorly, but a blend of compost, aged topsoil, and organic matter, fills 2 4x8 beds for roughly $50 to $70 when bought as bulk bags rather than premium pre-mixed brands. Call it $60. Seeds came next: cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, bush beans, loose leaf lettuce, arugula, basil, and cilantro. A focused seed order covering all of those crops, buying seeds rather than transplants, runs $25 to $35 with packets left over for a second planting. Call it $30. Then the perennial layer, which is where the remaining money becomes the most important spending decision in the entire setup. 3 blueberry bushes at $10 to $15 each, $40. A flat of 25 ever-bearing strawberry plants, $15. A bundle of 20 asparagus crowns, $20 to $25. A small collection of perennial herb starts, chives, oregano, and thyme, roughly $15 for the 3. A basic trowel and snips if you do not already own them, $20. Total, approximately $490 to $500, depending on where you shop and what you already own. 2 productive raised beds, a berry section, an asparagus bed, and a permanent herb patch, built once. That is the system. The reason this particular combination of plants works as a long-term financial structure, not just a first-season garden, comes down to how the 2 layers of it operate at different time scales, simultaneously. The raised beds are the annual engine. Tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, greens. These are replanted each season. They produce heavily, and they are where most of the first-year return comes from. They are also where the ongoing cost lies. Seeds every spring, $20 to $30, plus whatever soil amendment you add. The beds themselves, once built, are infrastructure. Cedar does not rot in a season. The soil biology improves every year. Year 2, the beds are already there, and the cost to run them is nearly nothing beyond seeds. The perennials are the compounding layer. Blueberries, strawberries, asparagus, herbs. These plants grow into the setup over years, not weeks. They are not impressive in the first spring. The blueberries are small. The asparagus is resting and building its root system underground. The strawberries are establishing. But every year that passes, these plants become more productive, require less attention, and cost you absolutely nothing additional because you are not replanting them. They are the part of the garden that makes the $500 investment into a permanent return rather than a one-time season. Put both layers together, and what you have is a system that pays you in year 1 primarily through the beds and pays you in year 3, 5, and 10 increasingly through the perennials, at essentially zero additional cost. Year 1 was honest. The beds did not produce $1,000 in exotic vegetables. There were slugs. There was a week in August where the cucumbers got ahead of me, and 2 of them reached a size that made them more useful as a prop than as food. But the cumulative effect across the full season was real, measurable, and showed up directly on the grocery receipt in a way I had not fully anticipated going in. The herbs came first and fastest. Basil reached a harvestable size within a month of transplanting. Cilantro started producing within 3 weeks. For the rest of the summer, I did not buy a single fresh herb at the grocery store. For context on what that means financially, fresh basil at the grocery store prices out at the equivalent of $40 to $60 per pound. A single, well-managed basil plant in the ground produces ounce after ounce from late spring through first frost when you pinch it consistently. 2 basil plants and a cilantro patch replaced what had been a regular weekly grocery line item, gone entirely from the receipt. The salad greens came next. Loose leaf arugula and mesclun were ready to harvest in about 5 weeks from direct seeding. I set them up on a succession schedule, a small amount sowed every 2 to 3 weeks, so the patch kept producing continuously rather than all at once. Baby spinach and arugula retail for $5 to $8 per pound. A steady flow of fresh greens from a 4-square-foot section across a long spring and fall season represents a consistent weekly grocery saving that adds up fast. By midsummer, the cherry tomatoes were in full production. Cucumbers were coming off the trellis every other day. The bean plants were in the harvest rhythm that makes them one of the most productive crops in any small garden. Pick every 2 to 3 days, and they keep setting new pods. Miss a week and production slows. By the time first frost arrived, the 2 raised beds had generated somewhere between $400 and $600 in grocery value, conservatively valued against store prices for the same produce. That estimate is supported by multiple independent analyses. The National Gardening Association puts the average return on a well-maintained food garden at approximately $600 for about $70 invested in seeds and supplies. A front door survey from 2025 found that food gardeners estimated saving an average of $875 in 2024. A Maryland family documented netting $100 in annual savings from a backyard garden producing over 50 plant varieties. Year 1 from 2 raised beds, starting mid-spring, landed conservatively in the $400 to $600 range, against a $30 seed investment after the infrastructure was already paid for. Year 2 is where the perennial layer started making itself known. The strawberry patch did something that no annual crop can do. It expanded on its own. Strawberry plants send out runners, long horizontal stems that root wherever they touch soil and become entirely new plants. The 25 plants I started with had, by the end of the second season, propagated into somewhere closer to 60 plants without any additional cost, replanting, or intervention. The patch was simply larger, producing more fruit per season, from the original $15 flat. Everbearing varieties produce twice per season. A flush in early summer and a second harvest in late summer, and the expanding patch meant both flushes were more productive each year than the year before. The blueberries were still small in year 2 and produced modestly. That is expected and worth understanding up front. High-bush blueberries begin producing meaningfully in their 3rd season and reach full production around years 5 or 6. The ATRA Sustainable Agriculture Program confirms that well-maintained blueberry bushes remain productive for 15 to 20 years, and possibly as many as 40 to 50 years with good management. A Virginia Tech Extension guide on small fruit planting puts the life expectancy of a blueberry bush at 20 to 30 years, with an annual yield of around 6 pounds per plant at maturity. The patience required in years 1 and 2 is not wasted. It is the establishment of an asset that will produce for decades. A mature blueberry bush yields between 5 and 10 pounds of fruit per year. At current organic retail prices of $4 to $6 per pound, and organic blueberry demand grew 14% year over year between 2024 and 2025, according to the California Strawberry Commission's market tracking. That is $20 to $60 of grocery value per bush per year for potentially 50 years. 3 bushes at $40 total. Do the math on 30 years of production at even a modest $5 per pound average. and you are looking at cumulative value that dwarfs what almost any other $30 investment could return. The raspberry canes that I added in spring of year 2, a small bundle of bare root canes under $20, came back from their root system the following spring without any replanting. Raspberry and blackberry plants are biennial caned but perennial rooted, meaning the canes die back each year but the root system persists and sends up new growth every spring. A University of Kentucky Extension guide notes that a well-tended raspberry planting produces for 8 to 12 years no new plants, no replanting. Just an annual cleanup and the canes come back, producing more berries each season as the root system matures. Now here is the plant I teased at the start, the one that requires the least from you and runs the longest, asparagus. 20 crowns at roughly $1 each, a $20 investment, maybe $25 at current nursery prices, planted in a small dedicated bed or along a fence line. You do not harvest in year 1. You take a light harvest in year 2. You harvest fully from year 3 onward. And from that point, according to Illinois Extension, a properly established asparagus bed remains productive for at least 15 to 20 years, with documented beds producing quality spears for over 50 years in the right conditions. 20 crowns, properly spaced, produce somewhere between 12 and 18 pounds of spears over the 6 to 8 week spring harvest window at full production, according to research compiled by food gardening expert Ask the Food Geek. At grocery store prices of $3 to $6 per pound for conventional asparagus and $4 to $8 for organic, that bed generates $48 to over $100 in grocery value every single spring. For 20 to 50 years, from a $25 planting after year 3, the annual cost of running that asparagus bed is essentially zero. No seeds, no new plants. A light layer of mulch in fall. That is the entire maintenance requirement. The bed just keeps producing spring after spring, every year you own the property. If you move, you leave behind a mature, productive asparagus bed that adds genuine value to the home. And if you stay, you are harvesting from it for the rest of your time there. There is also a replacement cost dimension to homegrown asparagus that rarely gets discussed. Asparagus at the store is the kind of vegetable that people buy deliberately. For a particular meal, for a spring dinner, for something that feels slightly elevated. It is not cheap. So people buy it cautiously, in limited quantities, rationing the purchase. When you grow your own, that calculation disappears. You pick it because it is there. You use it generously because the marginal cost of taking another handful is zero. The way you cook changes when ingredients stop feeling like a line item. The perennial herbs in this setup are the smallest budget line, $15 at planting, and they run the highest return per dollar of anything in the garden. Chives, oregano, and thyme are all perennial in most temperate climates. They come back from the root system every spring in most USDA zones without any intervention. Experienced gardeners have reported chive plants living for over 20 years in the same spot. Oregano grows to the size of a substantial bush given a few seasons and enough sun. Thyme is low-growing, evergreen in mild climates, and produces year after year with almost no pruning or care beyond keeping it from getting too woody, which you manage by cutting it back slightly each spring. The retail economics of these herbs are extreme. Fresh organic thyme, rosemary, and oregano retail at the grocery store for the equivalent of $30 to $60 per pound. A single established square foot of oregano, harvested consistently through the season, saves more in grocery spending than its original plant cost in a matter of weeks. Chives take up almost no space, come back every spring, spread slowly into a larger clump year after year, and cost under $5 to establish. Once planted, the cost of that herb section is permanently zero, and the return continues indefinitely, not just for this season but for years or decades. They also attract pollinators. Oregano and thyme bloom in summer, and the flowers draw bees into the garden, which benefits every other plant in the beds nearby. A herb section that saves you $50 a year in grocery spending while also improving pollination across the rest of your garden is doing two jobs from one $15 investment. By year 2 of this setup, the cost structure had collapsed to almost nothing. The 2 raised beds already existed. The soil, after a full growing season, had developed the microbial biology that makes an established bed more productive than a fresh one. Better water retention, better nutrient availability, better root environment for every plant you put in. A Burpee 10-year cost analysis study found that gardeners spending $50 on seeds and supplies can get $1,250 in produce value. And that figure improves dramatically as the soil matures and the gardener learns what works in their specific space. The asparagus was resting and building roots underground, storing energy in its crown system for the years of production ahead. The berry patch was expanding on its own. The perennial herbs were established, already coming back from their root systems in early spring before anything else in the garden had woken up. The entire ongoing cost of running this garden in year 2 was seeds, roughly $25 plus. Whatever compost I worked into the beds, which increasingly came from kitchen scraps through a simple compost pile rather than purchased bags. Vegetable trimmings, coffee grounds, eggshells, cardboard, all of it going back into the soil that feeds the plants that feed the household. The EPA describes compost as a free, biologically active soil amendment that improves plant growth and reduces the need for any outside fertilizer inputs. Total year 2 operating cost under $40. Return: same as year 1 from the beds, plus the first harvest from the expanded strawberry patch and the beginning of meaningful blueberry production. Year 3 looked different in a way that is hard to fully describe until you experience it. The beds produced as efficiently as ever because the soil was better. The strawberry patch, now fully expanded from runners, was producing several quarts of fruit across both summer harvests. The asparagus came in for its first full harvest. The blueberries had their first meaningful yield. The herbs had filled in completely, and I had not bought a single fresh herb at any grocery store since the plants went in. The annual cost to run the entire system, $25 to $30 in seeds, a bag of compost done. So here is the number that the $500 investment has actually generated. And I want to be honest about how I am arriving at it, because this calculation is worth understanding in full. The 2 annual beds return $400 to $600 per year in grocery value from year 1 onward against a seed cost of $25 to $30 annually from year 2. That alone, just the beds, represents a net return of roughly $370 to $570 per year after seed costs, every year for the lifetime of the cedar. Cedar raised beds last 10 to 15 years. Over 10 years, $500 net per year conservatively. The beds alone return $5,000 against a $150 build cost. The strawberry patch, fully expanded from runners by year 2, produces several pounds of fruit across 2 seasonal harvests from a patch that grew itself. No additional spend after the original $15 flat. Organic strawberries at $4 to $6 per pound across a season of 2 harvests from an expanding patch adds another $40 to $80 per year in grocery value at a cost of $0 from year 2. The blueberries reach full production by years 5 and 6 and run for decades from there. 3 bushes producing 5 to 7 pounds each per season, 15 to 21 pounds total at $4 to $6 per pound, add $60 to $120 per year at full output from a $40 planting. The asparagus bed produces 12 to 18 pounds of spears per spring for 15 to 20 years from a $25 planting. At $4 per pound on the low end, that is $48 to $72 in grocery value every spring reliably for 2 decades. The perennial herbs save $50 to $100 per year in grocery spending at 0 ongoing cost from year 2. Add it together across 10 years, beds returning conservatively $500 per year net, berries scaling up over the decade, asparagus running its full output, herbs steady every season, and the total grocery value generated by the $500 setup clears $5,000 over 10 years at the conservative end. At the higher end of realistic output across all components running at full production, the number moves past $8,000 over the same decade. The setup cost $500 once. The annual cost from year 2 onward is under $50. The return keeps coming, and it keeps growing as the perennial layer matures. The blueberries will still be producing in 20 years. The asparagus may still be producing in 30. The herb section will be there as long as the garden is. $500 spent once on the right plants in the right combination, in the right soil. That is the investment that keeps paying, season after season, decade after decade, long after the receipt is forgotten. If this gave you something useful, subscribe and hit the bell. There is a lot more of this coming. And if you are sitting on a backyard that is doing nothing right now, this is the video I wish I had found before I spent a single dollar at the garden center. Drop a comment telling me which part of this setup you are starting with first. Thanks for watching.